Hello and welcome back to my channel, Penny Prepper. Today's video we're going to be discussing what are you prepping for. Before we get started today, I'm going to ask that you hit the like button and subscribe if you're into emergency preparedness, the outdoors, or even just learning some new skills. So what specific emergency is it that you're most frightened by? What is your main goal for prepping, or maybe what are you unwittingly the most ready for? My personal worst case scenario would be an electromagnetic pulse, whether it's man-made or natural, such as a coronal mass ejection, completely frying the grid and not being able to stay in contact with my loved ones or anybody else that I would have that is a resource or part of a mutual assistance group. Because obviously phones wouldn't work, most handheld radios wouldn't work unless you have them in a Faraday cage, and you need to hope that the other people did the same thing at the right time. So it's one of those things where that's my biggest fear, is not being able to communicate. Most of my family is not right here, so it would be a 20-mile walk, depending on if vehicles still work. So I'd have to basically go 20 miles to see my family and probably a lot of my mutual assistance group just to see where they're at, if they're okay. And then if that's the case, I basically already bugged out. I might as well stay there because I am fairly close to a city. So it's one of those things where that would be my worst case scenario, is the grid completely going down where I'm not able to communicate. I can do without water. I can do without heat or electricity, but those are going to be my biggest ones, is telecommunication or just communication over a vast amount of area, because I would want to make contact with those people. Which scenario sort of frightens me the most is going to have to be something where it's either a war where, you know, there's a ration on food and it might affect the economy. There is always a possibility of being drafted, as well as having nuclear war breakout, depending on the scenario and who's involved. But as far as locally, I would probably have to say either civil unrest, which actually happened the summer of, I believe it was 2021, with the George Floyd thing. We had riots here. And then naturally, I'd probably have to say, I don't really have fires around here too much. Like maybe fire at the house would be my biggest fear, but I would probably have to say flooding. We do get floods here in Pennsylvania. That would probably be the biggest disaster that we would have, is flooding around here. So that is what I would be the most expect. I would expect a flood the most, but a fire here at the house would probably be my scariest thing to think about, because, you know, I'm gone parts of the day. I do have an alarm system, so at least that would alert me. But these are all things that you need to think about. What's most likely to happen in your area, and then plan for those. And then also, what is your worst case scenario? What is the worst possible disaster that could happen to you and your family? Would that be, you know, loss of a job for some people? Some people wouldn't mind. They might have a decent nest egg stored up. Or it could be something like a family member getting sick, something like that. Even those can be considered worst case scenarios for you, depending. So really what your main goal should be is trying to be as self-sufficient as possible, no matter what disaster you're preparing for, whether that's flooding, fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, nuclear war. It all depends, but still the thing that you're really aiming for is self-sufficiency, and to be prepared to go without the grid being up. You need to be able to store food, make food, and basically have a system for continuously replenishing those resources. So if you have a way of protecting your property, protecting those resources, that's really what your main goal or plan or mission should be, is to become as self-sufficient as possible, even if it's just starting out and getting a generator or something like that. So I'm going to go into some of the types of preppers that there are, and this is a way for you to sort of see where you're at, and at the end I'm going to go over why I went over these. So first and foremost, the one that everybody's probably heard of and pretty familiar with is going to be the doomsday prepper. the guys on the show, guys and gals on the show that you see who they make to be conspiracy nuts, but really they're just everyday preppers in certain levels of prepping. And really that can be seen as negative, but we'll keep going and we'll harp on that a little later. Next is going to be the bug-in prepper or the homesteader, somebody who has a self-reliant area, homestead. They're ready for the grid to go down and stay and hunker in. Next would be the bug-out prepper, the person who probably doesn't have as many supplies and they're ready to basically throw on their inch bag and head out to the mountains. And they're probably not as into prepping as the other people, but it's still an option, because you got to always think, what if you can't make it out and you have to stay where you're at? That's something you got to consider. Next is going to be the gear junkie or the tactical kind of guy, the person that has all the gear but none of the knowledge or know-how on how to use it. That's the people that, they go on Amazon, they buy these kits. They probably don't know that much about prepping. They have the bug out bag. They might even have a bunker. But you know what? These are probably going to be the people that don't make it at the very beginning because they're going to think that they're John Rambo and go out in a blaze of glory. But it's honestly probably going to be a lot less climactic than that. After that, you have the economist or the banker type, the ones who can foresee financial ups and downs, the ones that stack silver, the ones that really get into economics, and they can basically, they have the money. They know that if things go south, they're going to come out of it hopefully either the same or maybe a little bit less worse than they were before. And that's what they're really planning for, is when things go back to normal, eventually they're ready for that part. So eventually they're going to be pretty okay. They'll probably be millionaires when society starts to come back. But until then, they might not be able to use that gold or silver or whatever precious metals they have because they may perish. You can't eat gold or silver. I know that's a big thing people say, but you need to have other resources other than just precious metals. The next one on this list is going to be the bushcrafter / survivalist. That's the person that goes out into the wilderness and they are making their own structures for shelter. They're the ones that can filter water without a life straw. They're the people that can go a weekend and just take a pack and not need any specialized gear, where they can probably do a bow drill and they can make their own fire, keep it tended, make their own shelter. They can probably hunt and trap their own meals, stuff like that. This is probably one of the biggest leg ups to have as far as prepping, is going out there, doing the practical skills and being able to survive off the land. That is really what preppers should strive for. But it's not the most important thing, which I'll get into at the end of here. If you're a bushcrafter or survivalist, I don't want you to take offense to that. You'll see what I mean at the end of this list. Next is going to be all supply and no plans. The people that have maybe, say, a basement or bunker full of food, water, but they don't have a plan. They may not have thought out their defensive plan. They may not have thought out, what do I do if the homestead is compromised? Do I bug out? Do I have a plan A through Z? And then do I have contingencies on top of those? What do I do if when I open up my food, it is not good anymore? That's something where, it's great to have the supply. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying you need to have plans, contingencies. You need to practice with your equipment, do checks. You can't just buy stuff, leave it sit, and then hope that when things go sideways, you're going to be ready for whatever comes. Next is going to be the by-the-book prepper. This is going to be a little bit of an odd one, but I consider them the most dangerous. It's the ones that look at the FEMA website and they see to have 3 to 5 days worth of food stored up, and that's all that they prepare for. You may have also heard the term werewolf or the golden horde, the people that pretend or seem to be preppers or prepared, and then they don't have the resources or the means to continue to survive. So what do? They end up going out and trying to scavenge or take other people's preps. And that's why they are the most dangerous, because they may appear as though they are trying to help you, whereas when stuff goes sideways, they will actually end up taking more from you and can possibly lead to a dangerous situation. With that, you can also consider the by the book prepper, the bare bones or bare minimum prepper, the people that they might think, oh man, I really need to get ready for an emergency, but they have no idea what they're actually getting into. The people that probably at one time, talked down to you about owning firearms, and then when COVID happened, probably asked you, hey, things are getting a little dicey out there. You mind if I borrow one? It's like, nah, you can't. All right, next one and second to last is going to be the bragger, the person that's not really prepared, typically more of a conspiracy nut. They're the kind of person that will say that they have all this training. They may even lie, say that they were in the military, something like that. Really, I want to say that they're dangerous, but not in a way that you're thinking. They're not going to try to take your stuff. What they're going to do is try to become the leader and try to lead from the front, and they're going to get people hurt or worse, because they're going to put on this great show. They might even have a ton of gear, like the tactical preppers. They might have the vest, the helmet, and what happens is, by having that on first look, you're thinking, oh, okay, they might know what's going on. You follow them, and then you end up in a little bit of a shady situation. So that's dangerous that way. All right, last one. And after that, we're going to get into why, bushcrafters, stuff like that. So the last one is going to be the ghost, the gray man, the one that doesn't give up his preps. Nobody knows about it. Maybe even his family honestly doesn't know. He might have buckets or totes down in the basement or buried caches somewhere. He may have a bug out location that him and either only his wife or family know about, or maybe him and some very close-knit friends that maybe they are just very close and they know the plan. These are the guys that when stuff goes sideways, they already thought of everything. They have everything planned out, their routes, how much food they need. They are the silent, swift, deadly type that are going to be they're going to be off away from everybody when things start going south, and you won't even know that they're there. And if you do, they will probably know that you're there, and you may not get too close to them. You know what I'm saying? All right, so the reason I said bushcrafter and survivalist are not the ultimate preppers is because of the fact that you shouldn't just be one of these categories. You should be either a multitude, a spectrum, or some sort of combination of a few of these. I'm not saying to be the by-the-book FEMA prepper. That's an example of one that I probably would not recommend, the person that's bare bones or minimum. But what I would recommend is maybe having some back knowledge in economics or financials. Also having a lot of supplies, but having a plan. So it's sort of a combination. Like, you want to be the ghost or gray man, but if you want to have a mutual assistance group or something like that, then you might have to dabble into other ones, such as homesteading. Instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on maybe putting a bunker in, maybe you have a bug out location or something like that. It's one of those things where you want to have a combination of skills. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none, but at the same time, if you have a bunch of different skill sets, it makes you a lot more desirable, even if you're not an expert in one of those. So That's what we're talking about. If you are a bug-in prepper, maybe have a plan to bug out. If you notice from this video that you are a little bit of a bragger, maybe start to go more towards the ghost or the gray man. Maybe tighten up that circle a little bit. I'm not saying talking about your preps is the worst thing in the world. I'm just saying it to the right people. For instance, me doing this, I will never give out too much personal information. I will give you the tools to do your own stuff. But I don't know any prepper who's going to lay out their plans and say, this is where I'm going. Don't go there. All right, my call to action for this video is going to be for you to do a self-assessment of yourself and which type of prepper you might be. Now, granted, you may have different definitions for these, but, if you write it down on a piece of paper, it can help you really take an assessment of maybe what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, and focusing on making yourself better at your weaknesses. If you notice that you're a little bit of a bragger, you say that you are, you say to your friends about how you're prepping, and you realize, oh, those people aren't really part of my mutual assistance group, and they may try to come to your house, knock on your door, and ask for asylum, maybe that's something you should take a look at and realize, oh, time to reel it in a little bit and start focusing on that weakness. All right, that's all we have for today's video. If there's anything you would like to see, please comment and let me know. Stay safe and stay prepared.